Hi friend, welcome to the Live Study channel. Today I am going to discuss about how Sublet works. Right? Just imagine we have a client machine here and server. Then we have talk about website and client send request. Client send request on server. Then server like http like abc.html page on server. Then same process is a request, post request, and then response in a client. But http sublet service is used, and the main point is when the web server like Apache Tomcat start up the Sublet container deploy load all the service sublets. During this setup, Sublet container create Sublet contacts object. Sublet contacts is an interface that define the set of method that a sublet can use to communicate with the Sublet container. Like it's a very most important notes. There is only one Sublet contacts per web app, which is common to all the sublets. Sublet contacts has several useful methods such as add listener method, add filter method, etc. For now, I am not explaining them as I will cover them in a separate text about Sublet contacts. Once the sublet is loaded, the sublet container create the instance of sublet class for each initiated sublet. It is init method is invoked. Third point is client means user browser send a http request to web server on a certain port, like port number is 8080. Container creates a http sublet request and the http sublet response object. The http request sublet request object provide the access to the request information, and the http sublet response object allow us to format and change the http response before sending it to the client. The sublet container spawns a new thread that calls service method for each client request. The service method dispatched the request to the correct handler method based on the type of request. For example, if the server receive a get request, the service method would dispatch the request to the doGet method by calling the doGet method with request parameter. Similarly, the request like post, head, put are dispatched to the corresponding handler doPost method, doHead method, doPut method by service method of sublet. When sublet container shut down, it unload all the sublet and call destroy method for each initialized sublet. Okay. The http like the sublet contacts. Just I'm going to talk about the sublet context. When the sublet container it's a deploy all the load the web application. When the application is loaded, the sublet container create the http context. Once the keep it the server memory, the web app like application means like web.xml and all the include web fragment.xml file is passed, and each sublet filter listener method found all each class annotation with the @web sublet @web filter and @web listener respectively is initiated. One is kept in the server memory as well. For each initiation filter is init method invoked with the new filter configuration. Like HTTP sublet request and HTTP sublet response. The sublet container is attached to a web server that listen for HTTP request on a certain port number like port 8080, usually used during the development, and port 80 in production. When a client programmably use URL connection, send a HTTP request, then Sublet Container create a new HTTP Sublet request and HTTP Sublet response object and pass them through any defined filter in a chain or eventually the Sublet instance. In case of filter, the do filter method is invoked. Then the Sublet container code call chain dot do filter like method request, another is response. Then request and response continue on the next filter or hit the sublet if there are no remaining 5 filters. Okay. In case of sublets, the service method is invoked. By default, this method determines which one of the do dash any method is to invoke based off the response.get method. If the determined method is absent from the sublet, then HTTP 404 error return. Like HTTP 405 error return in the response. The request object provide access to all of the information about HTTP request, such as its URL, header, query, string, and body. The response object provide the ability to control and send the HTTP response the way you want by or for instance, allowing you to set the headers and the body, usually with the generated HTML content from a JSP file. When the HTTP response is committed and finished, both the request and response object are recycled and made available for reuse. It's a little bit section. It's not a little bit. It's a session. It's like HTTP session. A little bit section like a session. It's just called HTTP session. When a client visits the web application for the first time or the HTTP session is obtained for the first time, view HTTP request dot get session method. Okay, like get section method. The Sublet container create a new HTTP session object generated a long and unique ID which you can get by section.getID. Okay, means HTTP session, the object means the generated long and unique ID and store it is the server memory. The Sublet container also set a cookies in the set a cookies header of all of the HTTP response with the JS session ID as it is name and the unique session ID as it is value. As for the HTTP cookies specification, as a contract, any decent web browser and web server must adhere to the client means the web browser is required to send these cookies back in absent subsequent request in the cookies header for as long as the cookies is available. The unique ID must be referred to an unexpired session. The domain and path are correct. Using your browser built-in HTTP traffic monitor, you can verify that the cookies is valid, and the the sublet container will check the cookies header by every incoming HTTP request for the presence of cookies with the name of JS session ID and use it as value session ID to get the associated HTTP session from our server memory. The HTTP session stay alive until it has been idle, means not used in a request for more than the timeout value specified in a session timeout. At a setting web@gmail, the timeout value defined to 30 minutes. So when the client doesn't visit the web application for longer than the time specified, the sublet container trash the session. Every subsequent request, even with the cookies specified, will not have access to the same session anymore. The sublet container will create a new session. On the client side, the session cookies stay alive for as long as the browser instance in running. If the client close the browser instance alt tab window, then the session is trashed on this client side. In a new browser instance, the cookies associated with the session will not exist, so it would no longer be sent. This cases an entirely new HTTP session to be created with an entirely new session cookies being used. Okay, so I think you understand how to sublet work. Thank you for watching this video, and please like and subscribe and share your friend. Thank you.